for the drums.
Hey, Jonathan.
Hey Keith, what do you got today?
Well, this is really exciting, actually. What I'd like to do is start off a new little series here. We're
Hmm.
beginning to record season 2 of the podcast. We've got Robert Rouse, who's going to be joining us from time to time. And you've got a lot of stuff that you want to share about analytics, data models, and grand totals, all this kind of deep techie stuff. Robert's got a whole series that he wants to do on everyday design practices.
Hmm.
And I've got a series here that I'd like to begin to present. It's called Tableau Mental Models.
Woo!
Mental Models.
Hmm.
And so, what this is, it's really the culmination of your thinking and my thinking, and probably about 8 or 9 or 10 years now of the
Hmm.
two of us just kind of like coming together and thinking about how is it that we can, what are the ways that we can kind of make sense of all of this stuff that's going on. How can we
Hmm.
garner more of a relational understanding
Yeah,
of what's going on?
yeah. I'm looking forward to this and seeing your take on it because it's been a while since
Yeah.
I've seen it. So
It's been a lot of while. It's been a long while. So many of
yeah.
these slides
Hmm.
actually are your slides from years ago,
Hmm.
and they're kind of mashed up with my slides from years ago. And the main idea here is that um, Tableau was introduced, and we had this wave of enthusiasm because it was this magic thing that whose goal was to help people to see and understand their data.
Yep.
And still today, Tableau gets a lot of kind of fame, and the way that can be thought of is like a slide projector for your data.
Hmm.
You
Tell me
know, you,
more.
you, you stick your data
Hmm.
in, and it makes this magic image on the screen.
Hmm.
But as we know, there are so many things that can kind of interfere with one's ability to make the slide projector magic happen. And that's really what these mental models are all about, right? And so
Hmm.
I know I've seen some of your material that you're going to be presenting to us soon. It can get pretty weedy, right? Like if you
Hmm.
think back also to whole season 1 we did on the data model and relationships, the nuts and bolts of how all this stuff works can really get to
Hmm.
be brain busting. And for that reason, it can be really, common for your lay person who's just getting started, for
Hmm.
somebody even a veteran to just wind up in this situation where they just have a sense of overwhelm, right?
Hmm.
And
Yep.
so our goal actually is to take that sense of overwhelm and just kind of turn it on its head, and
Hmm.
and and have everybody feeling empowered, confident, secure. You know, what we're really searching for is that emotional sense of security when you know sort of what to do and how things work, right?
Hmm.
So
Yep.
my main thesis here, Jonathan, is that when you understand how things work, you can work with them,
Hmm. Yep.
right? And so a lot of the material out there, when I was learning Tableau, I was reading your blog voraciously.
Hmm.
I was writing my own blog, and it's a great way to learn and to teach others. But one of the main sort of problem statements with a lot of that material that's out there, both in the past and in the present, is that a lot of that instructional material is really recipe oriented,
Hmm.
you know, and that can be super great when you Google and you find exactly the recipe that tells you what button to click,
Hmm.
But the goal here with these mental models actually is to get more of a relational understanding, right?
Hmm.
So that we can move away from needing the recipe book, and we can just chef with the slide projector for your data, so to speak. That we can
Hmm.
make anything that we want from any data that we want, and not need to kind of search for the recipe on how to do exactly this or that to follow instructions.
Yep. Makes sense.
So um, here in this introduction to the series, so I've got a whole series. At the moment, I've identified 11 of these mental models. We might add
Okay.
a couple of more by the time we're
Mm-hmm.
done. So we've got a long way to
Yeah.
go. This is just sort of introducing the series. One of the main ideas behind why do we need mental models, right? Because that's what this conversation is
Mm-hmm.
about. Why is it that this relational understanding is so important? Well, we've got this thing that is, this optimal state that we can be in as human beings, where we have just the right amount of challenge
Mm-hmm.
that's appropriate to the skill level that we have. And we're neither under challenged nor over challenged. And this really is kind of an important thing. And it can happen a lot in technology where we have this sort of imposter syndrome. I know you suffer from
Mm-hmm.
it. I suffer from it. I mean, we know a lot about what we're
Yep.
doing, and still I find myself in this anxiety state all of the
Mm-hmm.
time because I think other people know more than I do, or
Mm-hmm.
the challenge that I'm facing is greater than my skill sets and I'm just not good enough, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is really why we need these mental models, is to help bring us back into the flow state. Because
Yeah.
honestly,
Can we go back on that for a second?
yeah, sure.
Because
Yeah.
because for me in that there's another piece to this that I think is important is that in this like level of stress axis there's more and more stress and performance is that the more I'm into that level of stress place, the more I'm going to be in that place of just give me the answer. Like just give me that set of instructions.
Hmm.
And then I'll do it and I'll take it in and I'll put it out. But then a day later, a week later, I can't tell you how to rebuild that visualization. It
Right.
didn't land.
Right.
Um,
I was in fight or flight mode,
mm-hmm,
grasping for a life preserver
mm-hmm,
when I just like stayed up late, went to the Google, found the
mm-hmm.
instructional recipe, tried the Rubik's Cube in all of the different ways, right?
Yep.
Like I was in this anxious state,
Mm-hmm.
trying to make it work out, right?
Yep.
Grasping for straws. And so then I thank you for taking us back to that,
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan, because the point is that when you're in those types of environments,
Mm-hmm.
you're not really, your brain isn't kind of configured in such a way that you're able to learn and retain.
Yep. And to that, for our audience watching this series of videos, this is a series that we're not going to be in this like boom, 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 do this thing and everything will work out. It's going to be much more one to be more in that middle state of wanting to learn and ready to learn.
Yeah, totally. So, and I'm really
Yep.
happy that we're
Mm-hmm.
going to be recording these different series in sequence, because some of your content that's coming up, just like season one with the
Mm-hmm.
relationships, can
Yep.
be a little heady. It can be a
Mm-hmm.
little bit anxiety producing, especially for the
Mm-hmm.
person that doesn't have as many years in the seat as you do,
Yep.
just trying to figure out what are these
Mm-hmm.
guys doing. And so,
Mm-hmm.
what I was hoping to do with this series is to sort of balance that ship a little bit, and we can record both in parallel, and we
Yep.
can sort of be diving deep into the weedy stuff with your material, and then zooming back out with this material in more of a relaxed way, putting
Mm-hmm.
together these mental models and these relational understandings, that ultimately are kind of designed to help keep us in the flow state, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as one's skills are progressing, then one is able to take on more and more challenges. And as one is able to kind of focus and look at a given problem statement with the correct mental model to make sense of what would otherwise be overwhelming, that's what keeps us in the flow state. So that's
Mm-hmm.
what this series that we're introducing here today is all about.
Yep. Yeah, that, and there's a way I think of it with that so many of us had when we started with Tableau. We got to be in that flow state with data where we're dragging and dropping, we're clicking show me, maybe we're throwing some things on the marks card in different ways, and we're seeing things in our data that we never saw before. Maybe nobody else had ever seen them either, and then we get to share them out with others. And then we start trying to do other stuff in Tableau, and maybe it gets too hard. Um, or in the case of as we build our skills, we're taking on more and more challenges and finding that place where the work and the tool um, is something that is rewarding to us.
Totally.
Yeah.
This is one of the
Hmm.
things that you talk about a lot, and I observe it in
Hmm.
myself all the time, is that dopamine hit that you get,
Hmm. Yep.
because you're constantly working the Rubik's Cube.
Hmm.
And when you can be in this flow state, making new discoveries, slinging pills on the canvas, opening up new insights, it's this really rewarding experience.
Hmm.
And so that's really my conjecture, is that these mental models can help people to um, find the lens through which to look at certain problem statements in order to keep us there. And one of the things that I really like about all of this material, because we just got back from the conference, and the AI, the generative
Hmm.
stuff, all of the new data science, machine learning is all kind of in the headlines. A lot of these mental models are really just oriented around fundamentally understanding the basics.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah, these core parts of how Tableau works that aren't necessarily documented.
Right. And not necessarily
Hmm.
spoken of. And if they are
Hmm.
spoken of, they aren't spoken of in this language, which we
Hmm.
think can help people to understand. And so then, with this thesis that if you know how things work, you can work with them. And if you have a mental model for how the moving parts they function, then that can really help you in these problem
Hmm.
situations, and help to kind of stay out of that anxiety mode.
Yep. That's great. When do we get to dive in?
Okay, well, let's run through just a little bit more. I'm going to
Hmm.
set the stage for
Okay.
why we need these things. This is a really kind of key slide, I think, in the Tableau universe, and it's one
Hmm.
that hasn't really received a lot of attention recently. It's this
Hmm.
visual query process, and this idea that was really core to the inception of Tableau as a product. This idea that you have this iterative cycle of visual analysis, that when you get in those dopamine hits and you're slinging the pills around on the canvas and you're in that flow state, you're really bouncing around between each of these differing kind of steps in this cycle of visual analysis. And what's really important is that it doesn't necessarily have to be circular or
Hmm.
procedural or sequential, where one step follows the next. And the idea is that when you're in this flow state, you're just kind of back and forth. You've got some task, you get some data, you get an insight, you choose a visual encoding, you share it with others, you go back, and you could be working around in circles on this iterative cycle of visual analytics, or when you're in that flow state, all of the cylinders are firing, and you're bouncing rapidly back and forth
Hmm.
between them. And so the whole idea is, the thing that makes the slide projector such a wonder is that all of these features that were built into Tableau are literally designed to keep you in that flow state. So
Hmm.
it's really, we're off to a good start with this product, because the product was designed to keep you in this flow state, and to
Hmm.
actually kind of serve this cycle of visual analytics, and to serve that process of ad hoc analysis as you go.
Hmm.
However, and
Hmm. Hmm.
along the way, Tableau have just championed this really great way of letting you get to nearly any data source, letting you perform calculations at all of these different levels of granularity, letting you do this amazing data model like relationships, and earlier it was blending. Like, there's a lot of
Hmm.
stuff that has come about since that big invention 20 years ago that came out of Stanford. And some of the problem can be that contributes to this sense of overwhelm is that we lose sight of the forest for the trees,
Hmm.
right? Like, there's just all of that stuff, all of that extra stuff that can
Hmm.
impede or get in the way or prevent us from being in that cycle of visual analytics, and feeling
Yep.
that flow that we want to feel.
Yeah, there's this place for me where um, I spent a winter looking at Tableau's order of operations. That was like my hobby that winter, and I was um, looking at the logs and seeing the SQL that Tableau generated, and then running that on my own and figuring out what was happening when. And when we do that drag and drop of a field in Tableau, dozens of things can happen in that moment.
Mm.
And Tableau's doing that so we can get the gorgeous view with exactly the right results and all of that. But then as we start laying in this complexity, it can go off in different ways. To your point, this like there's all these trees of things that can happen with densification or data blending and so on and so on and so on. So I see, for me, some of the mental models are this is the underlying pieces of how Tableau works. Whereas if we were writing Python code or something like that, we'd be writing all that code to do all of those steps to generate that visualization and would see it. So what is that code? What is that logic underneath Tableau and the design decisions that the Tableau developers made in the first place? What was their thinking about understanding data? And that as we can understand that better, then we can make better use of the tool.
Totally. And then your mental model is aligned with the mental model of the tool. Everybody's in a flow state. So that's really what this series is about. So I guess we could begin then with our first mental model.
Okay.
What do we mean when we say mental model? Like, what is a mental model? Can I define that thing?
Yep. All
okay.
right.
So a mental model is basically a tool that's useful in order to kind of leverage our working with a given problem. And it helps us to structure our approach to that problem with some strategy. So normally we're just kind of going around in the world, operating day to day, encountering challenges in our life. And we can loop in this process where we have some kind of real world circumstance. We get some sort of informational feedback from that circumstance. We make a decision and we loop through life like this. When you get too far in the challenge situation and you're out of the flow state and you're experiencing that anxiety, that itself is an informational feedback that can be indicative of what's needed here. Is there's something about my understanding of what's going on that isn't working, right? And so that kind of feedback in your body is the indication that really now it's time to drop down and find some mental model from somebody else who's been here before, who can help me to look at this information that I'm getting from the real world and structure the way that I'm looking at it and structure the way that I'm experiencing it so that I can approach that next decision with some strategy.
Yep.
That I can approach that next decision with just a way of looking at things so that I'm sort of breaking that cycle of anxious, just kind of arg.
Yeah, I love this framing of it, because there is that blue loop where everything's going well, and yes, there's change happening in that feedback decisions into the world, how that happens and everything, and that so often there's that place where we get stuck. And in Tableau, it can be like we're staring at the screen and it's not doing what we want, and we're looking for the button to push to fix it, or the blog post that's going to fix it. And the issue is kind of this deeper one, this deeper framing of what's going on. Yep. So like one example for me with that is the whole wide versus tall data, and what is that? And that's one of those cases in Tableau where we're dragging and dropping things and it doesn't work. And
my gosh, that's exactly the one that was on my mind too, right? Like that's a mental model, wide data versus tall data. We can cover that. When I was learning, I spent an entire Sunday afternoon trying to force wide data to do something.
Oh, I'm sorry.
And you helped me out. It was either you or Joe. One of you was just like, "Oh, just pivot that thing." And there's such a mixed experience in those junctures, because you're like, "Oh my gosh, I spent an entire Sunday afternoon in anxiety." But then also there's this sort of brilliant unlock too, because now you know that you don't ever have to do that again. So we've got these 11, count them, 12 mental models coming up that hopefully can provide, a pretty significant unlock and a new lens, a new way of looking at the world. That if you choose to go along this journey with us, we can weave those into Jonathan's material. We can weave these mental models into Robert's material. and
Mm-hmm.
hopefully at least give you some, kind of a red pill, green pill kind of option in your life.
Or blue pill, green pill.
Yes, the next time that you have kind of one of these
Mm-hmm.
anxiety producing situations.
Yeah. Great. I love it. So I'm
Okay,
looking forward to the
so
other videos.
yeah, that's the intro to the
Mm-hmm.
series, and we'll see you soon for the first mental model.
All right. Thanks. Bye.
Okay, bye.
Wait for the drums.